Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Many of you may be surprised to see me up here, perhaps wondering which of the plethora of issues consuming the world today that I'm going to talk about. Well, I don't have that long, and I know that Mark wants to quiz me after, so I'll keep this important topic brief. I'm here to talk about something that I believe will resonate with all of you as leaders, as creators, builders, and change makers. How do we invest in our shared future to solve the challenges we face today as a divided society? Now, as a dad, this has me constantly looking for solutions. And as a man who was born into a life of service, I recognize that with power and a platform comes huge responsibility. And these days, I am determined to find and invest in solutions. And this is why I've been invited to speak in front of you today. Now, if Mark decides to go off script after, well, that should make for an entertaining segment for all of you. The way that I answer the question of how we invest in our shared future is different now living in the US to when I was living in the UK. Why? Well, because before I moved, so much of my life revolved around charity. And since then, while my charities remain a core part of my life's work, I've also been focusing on upstream solutions and prevention, driven by decisions and investments that address problems before they require fixing. Still, I've approached everything in my life through the lens of service. I'm not one to be caught in the divide between left or right views, not cornered by a belief in blue or red. Hell, I've never even been allowed to vote. From my institutional role traveling the world to my decade of duties in the military, I saw the power of serving others firsthand. My personal experiences overseas taught me that when you put others first, you build stronger, more sustainable systems. And that's true from Nigeria to Nepal and from Sydney to Santa Barbara. It's the same approach that I've taken in founding charities like the Invictus Games Foundation back in 2014 that supports and rehabilitates wounded and injured service personnel and veterans through sport. And more recently, with the Archwell Foundation, where we show up and do good for those who ultimately need it the most, supporting social impact initiatives, including digital safety and education, all under the umbrella of protecting our collective mental health. Now, some of you might be still wondering if I've wandered into the wrong room. But I assure you I haven't, because service extends far beyond the philanthropy sector. While nonprofits play a vital role in addressing social issues, it's clearly not enough in today's world. We need a dual approach, supporting philanthropic organizations while simultaneously investing in companies that are developing technological solutions to address the root causes of societal challenges. Now, focusing on one core issue at its source, ultimately to solve the hundreds that stem from it. Now, this would be a great time to talk about how a sickness in leadership across sectors, from politics to tech, can have a detrimental effect on millions, if not billions, of people. And when service to others is sacrificed for personal gain, when basic morals and empathy are abandoned in favor of power and control. But I'm not going to get into all of that now. Instead, I'll talk about how I've spent the last 5 years, sometimes publicly, but primarily quietly, investing in companies that align with my values and vision of a better tomorrow. Companies that understand the power and significance of service. Take my investment in BetterUp, the largest mental health and coaching startup in the world. This platform isn't just about coaching, it's about creating a holistic approach to well-being that integrates personal and professional life. Now, when you invest in people's health, mental well-being, and growth, clearly you get a committed workforce. A workforce that's not only more productive, but more loyal and engaged, and with improved recruitment and retention. If your business wants to attract the best people, then surely you need to be offering them something that they can't get elsewhere. Something that truly acknowledges the fact that day-to-day life has gotten so much harder, and that as bosses, you want to offer world-class coaching to your employees. Now, the people in this room represent a sizable piece of the industry dedicated to being the first and follow-on capital to the products and services that affect so many people positively on a daily basis. That represents a massive opportunity for impact. As investors and founders, you play an integral role in shaping our collective future. You have the power to influence how companies and teams think about their role in the world. And I believe that some of the most successful businesses of tomorrow will have service central to their mission. 5 years into investing, and I understand that investors and founders look for scalable solutions that leverage the latest technology with high returns. And I want to continue to play a role in thinking more holistically about the end consumer and the impact that we can have on that individual. Businesses that serve people, that have a purpose, whether through improving mental health, ensuring child safety, tackling climate change, or promoting equality, are not just doing good. They're creating real value and reestablishing trust. When you integrate these goals into your business, you're tapping into markets that are expanding rapidly and attracting investment. But it's not just about creating value for others. It's also about addressing the root causes of the challenges that we face as a global society. You all know the meaning behind the saying, "Don't put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole." Well, we seem to be pretty addicted as well as distracted by treating symptoms rather than addressing the deeper issues. Now, that's why I've chosen to invest in businesses that don't just look at isolated problems, but ones that approach them from a systemic, long-term perspective. But this service lens is only the start. If businesses are truly going to build a better tomorrow, service can be built into the design of their products, processes, and cultures. It is, after all, a choice. In a world where technology is more embedded in our lives than ever before, it's easy to forget the human aspect of it. We are now plugged into a vast global nervous system that can reflect our good, but so easily magnifies and fuels our bad. A balance of EQ with IQ is desperately needed. Too often, social media and tech companies have built products that place engagement over safety. And I've seen firsthand how technology can bring people together, but more often, how it can divide and harm them, especially our children. And if we aren't prioritizing safety for our children, what does that say about the very industry that is shaping our world? Every business decision can reflect a commitment to serving others, whether it's your customers, your community, or the planet. That's the future that I see. Companies that are designed not just for profit, but for an investment in a better shared future. After all, if we carry on at this rate, even the most profitable companies will exist in a world of smoke and rage. Every one of us in this room has the power to set the tone for what businesses will look like in the future. The companies we back are the companies that will set an example for others to follow. And I stand here with real conviction that the companies that thrive in the next decade will be the ones that lead with purpose, build with integrity, and invest in solutions that serve the greater good. From mental fitness to carbon sequestration, early education to veteran employment. These are some of the places that I've put my money and my time. And I plan to do much more of that on a larger scale in months and years to come. Thank you for listening, and please don't stop having the courage to stand up for what you believe in by investing in companies that can truly change the course of history for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's great. So thank you for that. I thought I might start on a more lighthearted note. Tell us about the first time you ever visited America, and what were you thinking back then? What did it feel like? What were you thinking?
What was that, 1995? I'm not going to lie, I can't remember what I was thinking. But yeah, 1995 was the first time I remember being in the US, and I was whitewater rafting with my mum and my brother in Colorado. So I thought America was pretty cool. It was the first time I'd whitewater rafted, so.
So you've been living here for 5 years. You know this because we discussed this before. I actually lived in the UK for more than a decade, became a British citizen.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Back then, I thought that gave me entry to the EU, but somehow that didn't work out so well.
That's poor forward planning, but yeah.
Tell me, what 5 years of living here, what do you miss the most about the UK?
Well, look, living here now for 5 years, it feels like home. Santa Barbara feels like home. Brought up both of our kids in Santa Barbara. I think left the UK when my son Archie was about 6 months old. And Lily, my daughter, was born here. What do I miss the most? Being British, maybe I'm not going to say the weather. But I don't know. I think, look, there's lots of little bits and pieces that I miss. I guess the countryside is a big piece to that. And one of the reasons why we live in Santa Barbara, I'm not really a city person. I like to be out in space with a big sky above me. But no, you know what? Life takes extraordinary turns. And we are, as a family, we're so happy here. The US provides so much opportunity and also a safe space for us, which has been great.
I'm guessing I'll give you two. A good curry?
A good curry. You know what? Yes, that's a good prompt. Thank you. Pub food.
You don't have to like curry, but it's
I love
good curry.
I love a good curry, but yeah, pubs and pub food is
the old
definitely.
King's Head pub in Santa Monica just doesn't really cut it, I got to be honest.
You know what? I have found an Irish pub just down the road in Santa Barbara, and it's they do good bangers and mash.
And I guess
that's sausages and potato.
And I guess there's like this thing you guys call football that's there.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of soccer. Whoa, football.
Okay.
But having lived here, I've definitely got into American football more than I probably should, especially Super Bowl. Who doesn't love a good Super Bowl?
What a great outcome, right?
You mean the last one?
Yeah.
Yes. No.
I'm a big Philadelphia.
No, of course. Like I would have probably put down a bet on the Eagles winning. So yes, quite an extraordinary.
Good man. Good man. So obviously the U.S. is awesome. What's one thing we could do better?
One thing you could do better?
As a country.
Actually, I'm an immigrant here. I'm not going to tell you guys what you can do better. I think, no, look, America is awesome. I think the entrepreneurial spirit here is unmatched. And America's not willingness, but support and excitement around innovation is extraordinary. So I'm not going to tell you or even consider to tell you what I think you can do better. So yeah, I'll stop there.
I will tell you, since I know you wanted me to make this a conversation, I will tell you my experience on both sides of the pond. Somehow in California in particular, in the US at large, but in California in particular, we celebrate failure. We accept failure. We tolerate it. We admire the fact that you tried. And if you tried and you skinned your knees and you get back up again and you try again, we applaud you. My memory of the UK was more like if you failed, less encouragement of like keep trying again. And I think it's important to have a society in which trying hard and failing is accepted. And I've traveled and lived all over the world, and that's a story I tell everywhere I go.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. It's by no means a criticism of the UK, but certainly here, one of the big differences that all the British people that I speak to, they all say the same thing, which is in America, everyone wants to get behind you, especially from a sort of a creation standpoint, business standpoint. Everybody wants to back you, and that is an amazing thing. People want to support you to be successful, and that's not the case in all parts of the world, for sure.
I listened to your open remarks. I appreciated your open remarks. I appreciate the 40 years of public service that you've spent. If anyone in this room hasn't read Spare, I highly recommend it because
you're plugging my book right now?
But I'm going to tell you why.
Shameful.
I'm going to tell you why is that like I lived in the UK and read the media about you and had perceptions about you shaped on the way the media told the narrative. And I read the book, and honestly, I was inspired. I was inspired because I didn't understand truly how much your life was for public service. I didn't understand that you did 2 tours in Afghanistan, that you were an Apache pilot, that you had done all this stuff, and somehow it didn't get through my media filter. So anyway, thank you. But I want to ask you about a life of public service. Where have you traveled? What have you seen? How is it? What does it mean to you?
There's quite a lot there, especially on the media filter point. I wonder what your algorithm is like now. Look, public service, it runs in my blood, right? I was born into a position of public service. So I don't really know anything different, or I didn't until I moved out here. Certainly 10 years in the military changed my perspective on a lot of things. You go to war, a boy, and you certainly come back a man. That is, without doubt, something that I've experienced and something that I've seen time and time again. And it was one of the greatest honors of my life, serving my country alongside US troops and other NATO forces. It really was, yeah, as I said, it was a privilege. But the opportunity within my institutional role, as well as my military service, to be able to travel the world was something that I treasure, because you get to meet people in all sorts of situations. You get to see how community works and runs when it's working properly, but also you get to see how it fails when it's not working properly. And again, in this digital age, there is so much that can change on a dime. But like most soldiers, most military veterans, even when you hang up your uniform, you still want to serve, which is why in this country and around the world, so many veterans are, I guess not expected, but are recognized for throwing themselves into volunteering. And one of the things that I really want to focus on moving forward is less of an expectation that they will show up for free, and more of a hope and expectation that we are able to pay them for their value, because the experience and the qualifications that they have working in high-stress environments, their leadership skills, logistic skills, these are people who have an incredible skill set. Hard to be able to transfer military skills to the civilian world, but that is something that a lot of people are doing, and we need to do more of that. But one of the things that I've noticed since moving to the US is there's so much respect for your veterans. I knew that anyway. Back in 2009 was another visit that I came over to the US shortly after Afghanistan, my first Afghanistan tour in 2007, 2008. I came and paid my respects at Ground Zero. And then again, I came back into 2013 as well. So I've done a lot of visits back and forward. But more recently, I think it's not just here in the US, there's a lot of focus on maybe sympathy rather than admiration and respect. And I've been quite vocal about that recently, especially at the Invictus Games, because if we view veterans with a line of sympathy, then we're bringing them into the workforce for the wrong reasons. You actually want to bring them into your workforce because if you don't bring them in, then there's going to be none left because everybody else is going to snatch them up first.
My observation, and obviously veterans, you've got both wounded veterans, PTSD, and the mental health issues, which we will come to. But the reason we love working with veterans is the leadership skills that you acquire and the sense of purpose that they have in the businesses they're building. In this audience, Kelly Perdue is here from Moonshots Capital. Paige Craig is here from Outlander VC. Maybe give a congratulations to them. They both have served our country and are funding people who have served our country. Let's talk about the VC model. We talked about public service and charity and giving money, and that perhaps VC is a good supplement to that can have maybe a bigger impact or as big an impact by giving money to people who do bigger things. How do you think about the VC model?
Look, as I said, like my whole life before moving to the US was so focused around philanthropy and charitable work. And there will always be a role for charity and philanthropy, but the world has also moved and changed so much so fast that, to me, now living here and seeing the entrepreneurial spirit here in the US, the VC model with the expertise, the support, the scalability, the investment, that to me is really a more targeted, focused upstream solution. And from my own experience in the charitable sector, once you need charity, the problem's already probably too big. So how can we use VC to be able to, again, get ahead of these problems? And that's why the public service, or the service element is so integral to that, because it's beneficial to absolutely everybody, especially from an investment and a business standpoint. But putting a Band-Aid on the problem to alleviate suffering is an important role. But what if we could be able to, in 5-10 years' time, be able to turn around and go, well, because of all these VC investments, there's a lot of, I'm not trying to put charities out of business, just so we're clear. But there is, for the greater good, for societal impact, there is a huge opportunity I see now, having learnt and met more people within the VC world, to be able to get up there and focus on the prevention upstream solutions. And that's why, again, BetterUp was brought to me. And when I first moved to the US, I was like, I really want to get involved with helping mental health support here in the US, but also globally. And I was thinking I was going to have to build something from scratch. And then Adam at Plus Capital came to me and said, there's this company called BetterUp. And I was like, oh, phew. Okay, so I don't have to build it from scratch. It's already been done. Great. And I want to throw my support behind that because, from my own personal perspective, having coaching is preventative, because with the world the way that it is, you don't want to be wishing that you had a coach or wishing that you had therapy by the time that it's too late.
If I think about what's important to me, of course, we all want to give money to charities. We do give money to charities. But to have a bigger impact, I think there's something to be said about Adam Smith or Milton Friedman or all these great thinkers who have pointed out that the profit motive both can create bigger outcomes for people in society, and even though it contains a profit motive, it can still do good. You can have profit and good. And I tried to explain to my own children, like, socialism, communism, they sound really good in textbooks or in your elementary and high schools, but they have not produced great outcomes for the citizens of their countries. So that's a model I hold in my head. If I talk about our own experience in mental health, we fall really short in this country of providing enough mental health to enough patients possible. We funded a Los Angeles-based business called Rula, designed to try and bring more remote telemedicine to people in need of therapy. And our goal is to get you therapists and get you off of therapy. We don't want you permanently on therapy. So I think the juxtaposition of profit motive for good will produce bigger outcomes than just giving money. That's my own view.
No, of course. And to me, look at the way that the world has changed from certainly the charitable sector, right? More people want to know where their money is going and whether there is actually impact being delivered on the ground. It's certainly harder to fundraise these days than it was 10 years ago. And as human beings, I think incentive is a really key piece to this. So if you are, service-minded, or if you are socially impact-minded, then what you put in, you want to get something back from that. And now a lot of people want to have just the satisfaction that the money that they've given is making a difference. But when you're talking about the VC element of this, whatever the difference that you're making, I believe, is multiplied 10, 20 times.
You founded Invictus Games. It was more than 10 years ago, about 10 years ago?
Our 10th birthday was September last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
With a goal of serving people who have served, with a goal of athletic competition for wounded warriors, What did you learn about starting something? You started it, you had a vision, you've created it, it's become, maybe you could talk to us for a minute about like, what has it become? How big is it? How important is it? But then what did you learn about starting and getting something off the ground and becoming successful?
That it's hard.
Yeah.
It takes a team, it takes a village, takes a lot of investment, and takes a lot of selling the concept. Like it was so clear in my mind after 2013, visited the Warrior Games, your Warrior Games in Colorado Springs. And once I saw that, it was so clear to me that this should be an international event. Because the Warrior Games is domestic, you have 300 competitors all into service. And having come back from Afghanistan on a plane with wounded soldiers and the coffin of a Danish soldier, for me, it was a case of we need to celebrate these heroes, not just them, but their families as well, for the sacrifices that they give. And when it came to Invictus, it was really creating this international style sporting event taken from the Warrior Games to affect more people and also give more people around the world the opportunity to celebrate these people that arguably haven't never been celebrated for what they've achieved. Obviously, sport is absolutely critical to this. But yeah, the beginning stages, I find myself trying to pitch and sell this concept that no one knows what it looks like. No one knows how successful it's going to be. J.J. Chalmers, a British Marine, thought that it was going to be an egg and spoon race, like a typical school sports day. He was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't. And, over 10 years, we were at the beginning in 2014, we started with 13 nations. And 500 competitors, and now we have 23 nations, still capped at 500, 550 competitors. And the teams at the beginning were 130 strong, especially for the UK and the US, predominantly visible injuries. And now 10 years later, probably 90% of the teams that are part of Invictus are made up of psychological injuries. And that goes exactly with the time frame of which you would expect these things to come to the surface, what we call invisible wounds. But if you've got a passion, a belief, and a vision, then one would hope and expect that you can find the right people. It's not a case of it's a bad idea, I don't believe, but you've got to find the right people to have that passion. But to a large extent, the people that I approached right at the beginning in 2015, most of them didn't have a military background, which was kind of weird. You'd expect that it would be the military people. Anyway, I digress, because now we've just come back from Vancouver Whistler and our first hybrid winter games, which involved all sorts of really dangerous sports like skeleton for a bunch of individuals that have already injured themselves, but they love the adrenaline, they love the rush. And to see these individuals heal through sport, and at the same time as them healing their whole network, their family, their friends, it's an amazing thing, and it's so simple. It costs a lot of money, but it's simple, and it's entirely worth it.
How do you finance it?
I'm not telling you that. No, it's support. We have companies, brands. We have philanthropists. We have a whole collection of different organisations. We have the governments. The Canadian government started with a 50 million pledge in order to facilitate the Vancouver Whistler Games, and it's something that I'm really proud of because it's making such a difference. And excuse me, it's not just about them as an individual. It's not just about them as the teams. I've realized that even though I only really envisaged the Invictus Games being needed for 2 or 3 years to help those that have come off the back of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, that 10 years later, I understand why it's needed. It's needed not just for them, but it's needed for the world as well because of what they represent. And it goes back to one of your previous points, which is resilience. Like, these guys and girls are teaching all of us the importance of resilience.
You mention invisible wounds. It's something I think a lot about. It's something I also appreciated about your book. Your willingness to talk openly about mental health and psychology. And I think I grew up in America in a society where, as men in particular, but everybody, you were told to be tough and not talk about mental health challenges and issues. And I love that the younger generation these days will talk about it. One of the things I talk a lot about to founders is shame. And the reason is, when you found a company, the arc usually goes like this. You found company, you attract capital, you're in the press, suddenly your parents are asking about the IPO. Like, people equate, oh, you just raised $8 million, you're successful, you have money, and you know that's not true. You raise $8 million, you know 18 months from now you're dead if you don't succeed and raise more capital or grow your revenue or do whatever. So you feel this enormous psychological stress that almost no one else really understands other than other CEOs. And many years ago, sadly, a friend of mine who I had given money to committed suicide. And I wish he were here with us this day. It was, I think, something like 13 years ago. And obviously I can't ever know, but what I put myself in his mind is, I know his business was failing, and failing felt so final. It felt like you were going to be shamed in front of everybody. And if I had Jody Sherman here today, I would say, like, you would have done 5 more companies. And I just appreciate that we as a society, that people like you are talking more openly about mental health issues. And I think particularly, and I would just say to VCs in the room, it's really important to be aware of the psychological stresses that founders go through, even when they feel like they're succeeding.
I suspect, or I expect everybody in this room to know that, right? Especially in today's world. And, you know, society is quite challenging, and it can certainly encourage and enforce stigma, of which the more people that talk out about it, and the more people talk about their own experiences, their personal experiences, the more we can sort of kick stigma down the road, because stigma thrives on silence. But every single one of us is susceptible to that, to the pressures of starting a business, to every pressure. And I think more so now than ever before, because you're not just looking after or focusing on people while they're at work. You have to acknowledge that their personal life is probably pretty damn hard as well. There is no us and them anymore. And, you know, whereas in the olden days, whereas there used to be a focus on executive coaching for executives, coaching now plays a massive role in so many companies around the world, because bosses understand and acknowledge that in order to be able to retain a workforce and have a loyal workforce and a productive workforce, that coaching prevents those downstream issues, because that pressure is a real thing. And you know it better than anybody in the room. I'm you know, speaking to the, not preaching to the converted, but it is a real case of pressure's a real thing, and everyone needs support in that. So if we can normalize the conversation, then someone who you thought was okay and was thriving, and then suddenly the next day they've taken their own life, there's survivor guilt in that as well. But we as human beings are very, very good at hiding what is going on inside, and we always will be.
So not to turn a serious topic into humor, but in the UK, we say preaching to the converted, but I'll teach you in the US, we say preaching to the choir. I don't know why, but that's
wonderful.
The local one. See, you learned something new coming to the Upfront Summit. You and I both have experience on both sides of the pond. I spent my entire life thinking that the European-US alliance was the most important, strongest sense of shared values that we had in the world. It does feel like right now that's being second-guessed. I would just love to hear, as someone who's served in the military, someone who's lived in both places, someone who hopefully has that sense of history. What do you think Europe and the US, what does that mean for the world? What does it mean for you?
Look, I'll answer this as a soldier and as a veteran, because that's how you pitch the question. I think one of the greatest things about America is its support and dedication to its allies. Without question, it is one of the greatest things, as well as America's influence around the world. These things cannot be taken for granted. And from a reputational standpoint, that it goes back to one of your sort of initial questions right at the beginning. That to me is what makes America great. Is the loyalty towards allies. In reference to the second part of your question, I don't. That's my answer from a personal perspective. I don't want to get into the politics of it all. I don't know. I dread to think what the world would look like if that changed. But yeah, certainly from a military perspective, having again the privilege of serving alongside so many different forces. Look, America and its allies. America has been allies with Europe since the 1940s, and from a strategic standpoint, it was a very smart thing to continue that, and I believe that should still continue.
I had a chance to ask people before I came in for questions like, what should I ask Prince Harry? I'll give you just two that I picked up from people outside.
People outside or inside?
Well, they were kind of outside, inside.
Okay.
Inside the security, outside the Intuit Dome. You have children. We have all these pressures of like social tools and digital availability and all of the challenges that brings up. What do you think about leadership in an era of like online all the time, social, digital availability?
Look, again, from my military experience, leadership is not about controlling people. Leadership is about supporting people. And I think that, especially in this digital world, if you are openly encouraging or allowing toxic cultures, you are affecting billions of people. I view it as mind and body, right? So talking, sort of using the sort of the mental health analogy. The mind being leadership and the influence, and the body being society. If there is a sickness in the mind, in today's world with the digital world, that so many more people are affected by single decisions. And I think that, there are so many people in this room that are investing in people, right? And in community, and in public good and social impact. And I think that should be the goal, especially with safety at the heart of the creation of a lot of these platforms.
You have started an initiative, Invictus Games, and you have that experience. You've got involved with startup companies like BetterUp. You've talked about deploying more capital. You're still incredibly young. I'll take that. What does the future hold for you? Do you want to do more startup stuff, more public service? Do you want to invest capital for good? Like, what does your future look like?
My goal is not to start more charities. There's enough to manage in that regard. I think one of my focuses certainly is towards the veteran community. So ex-service personnel, and being able to create that into an opportunity in a business, because I think, as I said, they need to be valued for their experience rather than just expected to show up. And let's do some deals, Mark.
That sounds great. I have a couple I'd like to show you backstage.
Okay.
I know that if...
Is that a good idea or a bad idea? It was slightly, by the way, it was slightly split.
Yeah, okay.
No, it wasn't a like, yes! We'll talk later, it's fine.
No, we've been doing this, believe it or not, for 29 years. Next year will be our 30th anniversary for Upfront Ventures. So that's not bad, right?
Ooh, congratulations.
I want to...
Sorry, hang on, before you ask the next question. Why do you do what you do?
Thank you. That's a good question. I feel like the way I talk about it, and maybe being in a stadium is a good analogy. When I was younger, I felt like I wanted to be on the court. I loved the energy. I started 2 companies. I wanted to start and build things. And I felt like I was pretty good at it, but at some point you wake up and you realize that your 3-point shot doesn't fall, or you can't run as fast as the young people, but you acquire a certain wisdom. And I felt at some point I would be a better manager than player. And I love the energy and enthusiasm and people. You know, the old saying is like the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. When I see the ideas that people have, there's a gentleman who was here yesterday, Reflect Orbital. They're taking massive, like mylar-like structures on satellites and reflecting the sun onto the dark side of the earth in off hours to basically create sunlight at any time in the world. And I just inspired by the vision of people like that who are thinking about tomorrow and the future. So I love being a part of that. That's why I do it. I'm going to finish really quick, rapid fire, finish on a positive, light note. Hershey's or Cadbury's?
Isn't that quite controversial? Doesn't Hershey's own Cadbury's here?
Does it? I don't know. We can agree that Hershey's is shite.
Okay, then Cadbury's.
Yeah. British politics or American politics?
Remember I told you, remember when I warned you earlier about the going off script part? I think this is probably it. I think certainly right now, British politics, but politics as a whole, I think is in trouble and it needs all of our help.
At least the theatrics of it. I love British politics. It was at Question Time where they all shout at each other, and it's kind of.
I don't know if there's not that much shout. It's very British. It's orderly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would the right honourable? I never.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Rather than I was thinking about BBC Question Time. You're thinking about in the actual.
I don't know. Yeah. It's just fun to watch.
House of Commons. Yeah. No, there's a lot of shouting. Yeah.
The last book you read.
The last book I read was mine. Back to that again. And then, well, it's a kid's book. Not for my kids, obviously. But yeah, Drafts Can't Dance is one of my favorite books for my kids.
Polo, which I imagine being kind of a royal sport, or F1 racing?
The way that you pitch the question makes me feel as though I have to say F1 racing. This is like a horsepower joke question.
Polo or racing?
I don't know. Look, I have a love of horses. I have a love of fast cars as well. One you can get more out of, if you know what I mean. And there's certainly a connection there. So can I say both?
You can say both.
Okay, great.
Listen, I'd just like to give a very warm welcome and thank you to Prince Harry for coming and talking to all of you.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, guys. Thank you.